Okay, I have some good news. Our annual mandated training will not be through videos this year. The bad news. We're doing them now. Okay. Okay, please make sure to sign in on the sheets on Main Street. That's proof that you attended this mandated training, or I will have to send you the link to the videos. Okay. All right. We are going to cover civil rights, confidentiality of student records, and our anti-bullying policy. Those will all be presented by Jane Hackett, our business administrator. Dr. Linda Maniglia, pupil personnel director, will review physical restraint policies. Freya Leahy, our adjustment counselor director, will speak on mandated reporting. And Tim Wells, our technology director, will hammer in internet protocols. Okay, you're up. Jane Hackett.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I can't stand in one spot for very long, and this is going to be as brief as possible, but it is important. We do need to take it seriously, and you do need to sign up, because if you don't sign up, you are going to have to sit in a conference room and watch this. So please, sign up. With that, we're going to go right through it, and we're going to start with civil rights laws and regulations relative to public education. Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. We cannot exclude anyone from participating in programs or activities based on race, color, or national origin. The Equal Educational Opportunities Act of 1974. All students at Rockland Public Schools have the right to equal educational opportunities no matter what race, color, sex, or national origin. Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972. We cannot exclude students from educational programs and activities based upon their sex. Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. We cannot exclude students from participating in activities based on a disability. Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. We cannot exclude students from participation or deny benefits on the basis of disability. The Individuals with Disabilities Act of 2004. This act governs special education programs relative to assistance and services. The Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015. Federal funding must be appropriated for improving achievement of the disadvantaged, professional development for teachers, family engagement, language instruction for English learners, and education for the homeless. Please make sure you have signed up out in the hall. Next is the confidentiality of students' records. The Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act of 1974 protects the privacy of students' education records and gives parents certain rights with respect to those records. Individual student records are confidential. This extends to giving out individuals' addresses and telephone numbers. What is confidentiality? Protecting all personally identifiable data. It applies to all discussions, both verbal and written. Legitimate educational sharing. Privacy. All right, hold on. All right. Start this slide again. Sorry, just as we practiced. Protecting all personal identifiable data. In addition to the student name and address, it includes the parents' names, other family members, and personal identifiers, such as social security number and student number. The exception would be for directory information unless the parent has refused to have this information released. Confidentiality applies to discussions, both verbal and written. Things to think about are who, what, where, and why. Who is or could be listening? Who or what is being discussed? Where is the discussion taking place? And why is the discussion taking place? This discussion should occur in a private place, such as a teacher's classroom. Discussions in public places should be avoided. Confidentiality could be violated if conversations take place in such areas as school halls, the playgrounds, busy teachers' lounges, or through social networking. Legitimate educational sharing. There is no problem with confidentiality if the parties to the discussion are school officials with legitimate educational interest and the information will help them work with the child. Discussions or gossiping about students or families regarding non-educational issues violates confidentiality. Privacy of educational records. Students' records, files, documents, and other materials which contain information directly related to a student are confidential. Individual education plans must be maintained in a secure setting. Emails are public records, and I think Mr. Wells will be speaking about this a little bit more later on. Therefore, please be sensitive to violations of confidentiality when sending emails, personally and on public forums. The Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. Most health-related records kept in schools are subject to the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. Next, our anti-bullying policy. Rockland Public Schools will not tolerate any unlawful, disruptive behavior, including any form of bullying, cyberbullying, or retaliation in our school buildings, on our school grounds, or in school-related activities, and we will take prompt action to end that behavior and restore the student that is being bullied, who is referred to as, quote, the target, end quote, in sense of safety. The policy is on the website. Please refer to it for specifics. Also, principals will review this policy in more detail with their staff. What is bullying? Bullying is the repeated use by one or more students of a written, verbal, or an electronic expression, or a physical act or gesture, or any combination thereof directed at a target that causes physical or emotional harm, places the target in a reasonable fear of harm, creates a hostile environment at school, infringes on the rights of the target at school, materially and substantially disrupts education. Good morning. I would like to introduce to you Dr. Linda Maniglia to discuss our next phase. Please sign up in the hall.
Good morning. All right, this morning I'll be discussing Massachusetts regulations about restraint and seclusion. It's not the most exciting topic there is out there, however, it is definitely very, very important. So since January of 2016, Massachusetts has mandated an annual training for all staff in prevention techniques and the regulations regarding physical restraint of our students. And our goal is to maintain the safety of our students and staff whenever we encounter challenging behaviors. So Massachusetts regulations govern the use of physical restraint on all students in public schools and charter schools, virtual schools, collaboratives, and approved special education schools. Now, the major purpose of these regulations is to ensure that physical restraint should only be applied in emergency situations or as a last resort. So changes in restraint regulations include revised definitions of restraint, adding the definition of time out, prohibiting the use of prone restraint, and revised reporting requirements that we must complete after any restraint has been administered or applied to any student. So as I've stated, physical restraint should only be used in emergency or as a last resort and situations when a student's behavior poses a threat of assault or physical harm to themselves or others, or when a student does not respond to our verbal directives, or when less intrusive interventions are deemed inappropriate in particular situations. So physical restraint is defined as direct physical contact that prevents or significantly limits a student's freedom of movement. It does not include brief physical contact to promote a student's safety, providing physical guidance when teaching a skill, redirecting a student for attention, providing students with comfort, or providing a physical escort. Now, a physical escort is defined as a temporary touching or holding without the use of force. Usually, if we are escorting a student, we may hold onto their hand, their wrist, their arm, shoulder, or back, and the sole purpose of that is escorting them to a place, a quiet place or a safe place where they can de-escalate and become calmer. So, brief physical contact that promotes safety or guidance when teaching a skill, redirecting a student's attention, providing comfort, or providing escort without force are all permissible techniques that we can use with our students. So training requirements include a general training regarding the district's restraint prevention and behavior support policies and requirements when restraint is used. Rockland also promotes PBIS, which is the Positive Behavior Intervention and Supports, the PBS, we do second steps, we do responsive classroom, and zones of regulation. In addition, staff in each of our buildings are trained or have in-depth training on CPI, which covers the proper way to administer physical restraints in order to minimize either staff or any of our students getting hurt. So all of us kind of play a role in preventing restraint and ensuring safety of our school community. Students should know and follow school rules and codes of conduct, which are listed in the student handbooks. And there should be continuous communication between our staff and families so that we make sure that our families are aware of school rules and codes of conduct. That way they can reinforce some of these rules and conduct that is acceptable and appropriate with their students so that when they come to school, they are more compliant. So in the event that you physically restrain any student, you must first notify your building administrator as soon as possible. And then you need to follow up with a written, detailed report within one school working day. The Rockland School District's stance on physical restraint is that it should only be used to ensure the safety of our students and our school community, only in emergency situations, and only administered by trained personnel. What? Oh. Okay, the new regs also point out the difference between timeout and seclusion. Seclusion is involuntary confinement of a student alone in a room or area from which the student is physically prevented from leaving. Timeout means temporary separation from a learning environment or a classroom. It doesn't always necessarily mean that we're going to bring a student to a special timeout room. Sometimes we can just, bring a student to a part of the room that's a little bit away from the learning environment, or we could escort them down to see one of their guidance counselors or adjustment counselors so that they can calm down and then come back to the classroom. With timeout, a student may request a timeout, or a staff member may direct a student to a timeout area. And again, the purpose of timeout is just to give a child an opportunity to calm down. When students are in timeout, they must be observed the full time that they are in timeout, and a staff member should always be available and monitoring to make sure that the child is safe and okay. If a timeout period lasts 30 minutes, then the building administrator must approve continuation of the timeout based on the student's continued agitation or level of being upset. We should also seek out our administrators and get their approval before we exceed the 30-minute time frame of a continued timeout. The emphasis of a timeout is always a behavior support strategy that is not punitive, but to give our students an opportunity to calm down. And also revised regulations explicitly prohibit seclusion. A student should never be left alone in a room without a student being in close proximity to monitor that student. So when you notice a student is exhibiting some escalating behaviors, some things that you can do to support that child would be, first of all, remove any objects that could be potential weapons, such as scissors, sharpened pencils, or anything that, that they could throw across the room. You also want to attempt to redirect that child to a quiet space. However, if the child will not go to another location, it's a good idea to remove the other students that are in that classroom until the child is calm, and then you can bring them back. So some positive behavioral interventions that could be utilized are offering some of our students choice of activities, reducing maybe their workload, reminding the students of incentives they can earn for exhibiting appropriate positive behaviors, and encouraging our students to use language and talk to us and tell us what is bothering them or what their needs or feelings are. This is important. If a student has a behavior plan, please make sure that you're aware of it and you understand how to implement that plan so that that student's behavior and reinforcement is consistent throughout the child's day. The new regulations also state that we cannot include physical restraint as an accommodation, as a goal, in a behavior support plan, a 504, or a child's IEP. So during crisis intervention, sometimes talking to a student whose behavior has escalated just can agitate them more. So good practice sometimes is just to give them wait time, or again, to escort them to another location, a quiet place or a timeout where they can have an opportunity to calm down and feel better. So again, physical restraint should be used only as a last resort. However, I will stress again that mechanical restraints, medication restraints, prone restraints, and seclusion are prohibited across all settings. And as you know, all restraints pose a significant amount of risk for both our students and our staff members. Good practice is to always, or whenever possible, conduct a restraint using a team approach. Any restraint that's lasting longer than 20 minutes increases the risk of injury and also, again, requires approval of your building administrator prior to exceeding the 20-minute time frame of that restraint. So just to summarize some of our key reporting requirements, all restraints must be reported. We must notify our building administrator as soon as possible and follow up with a written report by the next school working day. And when I talk about the next school working day, that means if you restrain a child on Friday, then the write-up is due on Monday. If you restrain a child on Tuesday, then that written report is due to your principal by Wednesday, okay? Next, the principal will notify parents verbally within 24 hours, and the principals will also provide parents with a written report within 3 school working days. And our families can schedule a meeting to discuss, why restraint was used and what kinds of things that we can, teach the child to do to avoid restraint in the future. Also, to increase safety, we should make an effort to be aware of any student that has medical concerns, psychological limitations, or has experienced some type of trauma prior to ever restraining them. And following a restraint, you should always schedule a meeting with that student and any other staff that might have been involved or witnessed it to talk to the child, to explain why that child was restrained and what they can do going forward to avoid being restrained again. So our Rockland School District uses the CPI, which is a nonviolent crisis intervention training program. And also, when you go back to your buildings, your principals will share a list of staff that have had in-depth training in the CPI so that you will know who your contact people are. So to conclude, regulations regarding physical restraint have changed in Massachusetts since 2016. Prevention of escalation or alternative positive interventions should always be a staff person's first go-to prior to any restraints. Again, restraint should only be used in emergency situations to ensure safety of staff members from assault or serious physical harm. Timeout should be used solely for the purpose of giving a child an opportunity to calm down. And again, a staff member should always be in close proximity to monitor that student and make sure that they're okay. Seclusion is prohibited across all districts, charter schools, all of the virtual schools, collaboratives, and the approved special education schools. There is a team of staff in your school who have received in-depth training, so you need to know who they are and how to contact them so that if you're in a situation and you need support, you know who your contact people are. And I want you to remember, this is important, there is nothing in the regulations that preclude any teacher or employee from using reasonable force to protect students or themselves from assault or physical harm. Okay? So that's basically, I know it's a lot of information, but it's a lot of important information about how we interact with our students. So if you have further questions, you can certainly contact me at any time. And now, I would like to introduce Freya Leahy. She is Director of Adjustment Counselors, and she will be discussing mandated reporting with you.
Good morning, I'm Freya. Welcome and welcome back. Mandated reporting is about making sure we all have a safety net in place for each and every one of our kids. We are all, every single person in this room, a mandated reporter, which means that we have to report any suspected allegations of abuse or neglect to the Department of Children and Families. It doesn't mean we have to know exactly what happened or try to figure it out. We don't have to have confirmed or anything like that. It's just our job to report it. Any and all questions of abuse or neglect should be brought to your building administration. Watch for changes in behavior, mood, appearance, or a significant drop in performance or participation. Also watch for signs of self-harm or cutting in older students. These can all be indicators that a child could be at risk to themselves or a victim of abuse or neglect. Any question about a student's safety or well-being, whether it is a conversation you overheard, an unexplained injury, or a student's report of abuse or neglect, is worthy of a conversation with your building principal, guidance, or adjustment counselor. We're lucky to have one in every building. Please don't hesitate to report any concern. By don't hesitate, I literally mean report it as soon as possible. Please don't wait till the end of the school day to reach out. If you send an email in the middle of class, whether it be to a building principal, adjustment counselor, guidance counselor, please follow up with a phone call at the end of that class. It's so much easier to address these concerns when students are still in the building. It's always trust your gut. You know your kids, you know these kids, you spend so much time with them. If something seems wrong, it probably is. We are all the safety net for our students. You can reach out to me anytime at the high school with questions. And your adjustment counselors, building principals, we're all a team, we're in this together. You're never gonna have to file alone. If you have any question, don't hesitate to ask. Next, Tim Wells, technology coordinator and fan favorite, will be talking to us about the safety nets of a different kind.